to show you one of my favorite artifacts. This purse was donated by Ruth Reed, which was given to her by her mother, Alice Reed, in the late 1800s when she was a teenager. It was made by Indians who lived in Coffey County. Alice was born in 1854 in Indiana to Hamilton and Rosetta Smith. Alice was only 6 months old when her family and young siblings traveled by covered wagon to what would be Ottumwa, Kansas. In the museum's genealogy library is a story describing Alice's life as a pioneer written by Nellie Louise Payne, Alice's granddaughter. I will read part of the story about the Indians and Alice. The severeness of the winter was just beginning to pass away when the men were called upon to help protect the border from Quantrell and his band of ruffians. They had begun to make such trouble that all available men were called up to fight them. Mr. Smith was chosen as captain of the little band from Ottumwa. For fear Quantrell and his band would come into Ottumwa and ransack it, the women and children were all packed into the Smiths' home, the women being alone because all the men had been needed in the fight against Quantrell. The woman pushed all the furniture against the doors and windows and secured all the knives and axes that could be found and kept them in easy reach. These knives and axes were their only weapons of defense, as the men had taken all the guns with them. The women with only these meager weapons were left to protect the children in the little town from an attack by raiders. After no sign of Quantrell in that vicinity, the women began to let up on their guarding and the children were allowed outside, only on the promise to stay close to the Smith house. The women still remained at the one home, for they thought it was safer until the men returned. One day, while the women were putting the furniture back in the right place, the little baby Alice had been placed in her crib and then was placed just outside the door in the sun. The day was a beautiful spring day. The sky was enchanting blue with fluffy white clouds floating blissfully by. And it was so warm in the sunshine. The women were in the house and only the children were outside. Apparently, right out of the clear blue sky came 4 big, dirty, husky, ugly, scarred Indians. They sneaked up unnoticed by the children until it was too late to call for help. The Indians took Alice from her crib and turned her quickly and disappeared over the horizon. The children ran screaming toward the house, and the woman, hearing their cries, hurried quickly to the door. Mrs. Smith reached the door first. She looked hurriedly around to see what might have frightened them. She looked the children over quickly and noticed they were all there, and instinctively she looked toward the crib at the side of the house, and the baby was gone. The woman knew there was nothing they could do, so they barricaded the house again for the fear the Indians would return. They were afraid the Indians might have noticed that there were only women and the children there and come back. The men came back early the next morning, and they immediately found that all had not been well while they were gone. Mr. Smith knew that the Indians had a start, and because of the condition that the men were in, they could do nothing until they had rested from their hard journey. He gave order that the men were to rest until noon, and then they would follow them as far as possible until dark. While the men were resting, a lone Indian came to the Smith house and knocked. When Mrs. Smith went to the door, he handed her the baby safe and sound. Alice, being too small to be frightened, had made ready friends with the Indians, and of course didn't realize she was in the hands of the enemy. After this, the Indians were the friends of the little town of Ottumwa. These Indians would often visit the little town, bringing beads and fancy beaded things to the children, especially to baby Alice, she being the favorite of the whole tribe. The baby, being too little, accepted them as her friend, and of course the adults would rather have them as friends than enemies. The town was never bothered by Indians, as this tribe had taken upon themselves to protect this little town of Ottumwa, all because of the baby Alice. Sorry. I don't know. Hi, my name is Kaylie, and I would like to show my favorite artifact. Sorry, I have like a...
Hi, my name is...
Who?